All this talk about delicious fruit and the bounty of wild yeast that can come alongside them, let's talk a little bit more about what that really means. So we've got Brettanomyces, which we talked about as our spotlight wild yeast strain that we're using in this. And my understanding with Brettanomyces is it does add some tartness to the beer. We are talking about sour beers. They are tart usually. But it's not necessarily the Brettanomyces that's adding all that tartness. Brettanomyces is more giving what we call funky flavors. So for me, those come across like lemon, leather, tobacco, those sort of funky notes.
Barnyard AF.
Barnyard AF, hashtag 2020. And that's what I love about these beers so much. But in addition to that, we've got some good bugs, what you guys like to call them, in the sour warehouse. That's Lactobacillus and Pediococcus. And my understanding of those is that Lactobacillus is gonna add a smooth mouthfeel note to the beer, along with some tartness and
Sure.
up the alcohol.
So there are many strains of Lactobacillus. The one that we're using, when it eats sugar, when it undergoes fermentation, it produces lactic acid, CO2, and alcohol. That lactic acid is the same thing that you get in yogurt. So in beers like Black Angel, when you're already getting a ton of vanillin from that American oak, that softness, that kind of creaminess really kind of, boosts that, enhances it, and makes a lot of sense flavor-wise.
It's almost like sour beer is a superfood with that.
It's definitely, I think it's good for you. You should ask your doctor though, because we're not experts.
But tell them you only have one a week. Because they always ask how many beers you have a week.
Oh yeah, one.
The doctor's like, yeah, one. Just one Wicked Weed sour keg a week. Okay, so that's Lactobacillus. For Pediococcus, now we're talking like molar smacking, right? That's the excitement. That's your atomic warheads, your Sour Patch Kids.
Yeah, and that, when you're looking at kind of the spectrum of sour beer, Pediococcus is a good kind of tipping point between Belgian sour beer and German sour beer. So when you're talking about German sour beer, you're talking Berliner Weiss, you're talking Gozas, and most of those, that acidity is coming from lactic acid. So the Pediococcus really works well in oak, and it produces, it's not even like a false creaminess. Pediococcus will actually create this ropiness. It's kind of, I don't want to call it snottiness, but like it's very ropey. So it can give a little bit of body to these really dry, attenuated beers.
Maybe a bit of a thickening agent there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And obviously when you get our beers in package, you're not gonna get that sensation, but that roundness and that kind of oak complementary flavor from the PDO is there. It's present and it's important, I think, for any wood-aged sour ale.
I think you've got it down to a science.
Or an art.
You be the judge. So Jen, in hearing all this information about Brettanomyces wild yeast, Lactobacillus, Pediococcus, it just seems like to me, I'm just a guy over here, it would be great if there were like an already existing sour beer or something like that we could just add to some wort we created. Am I crazy?
No.
Does that exist?
It does. And that, my friends, is Cosette.
Oh yeah.
So Cosette is produced the same way that we produce all of our barrel-aged sour beers. So goes up on the brew house, spends about 4 to 6 days in primary, goes into secondary, gets inoculated with Cosette. It's kind of this, kind of cannibalistic situation happening there. And then it goes into individual neutral oak barrels. So the main difference between a barrel-aged American sour from our program and Cosette is that the aging period is a lot shorter. We want to add Cosette to other beers and blend it in when it's young, when it's still active and still developing. So what that means is when we're looking to inoculate a beer like Medora, we're gonna taste through a lot of Cosette barrels and we're gonna select ones that are gonna complement raspberry, that are gonna complement blackberry, and that are really gonna drive kind of the acid character of that specific batch of Medora. So it kind of goes both ways. When we're looking for Cosette to inoculate our Brett farmhouse beers, even though we're only going to inoculate those at 10% by volume, we're going to choose more Brett forward Cosette barrels because, again, we're trying to keep that acidity level down, and we want to make sure that whatever acids are present are going to be complementary to whatever fruits are in those beers. That also means that we have a very tight grasp on the direction and the health of Cosette herself. So when we're choosing inoculant for future batches of Cosette, we're going to pick the ones that taste the best. I mean, why would we not? So it's a great way for us to check in on the health of our house culture and make sure that it's moving in a direction that we're happy with and excited about.
So that's house culture. I'm the curator of culture, but really, in revisiting this, I think you are.
I think I'm the shepherd of culture.
The shepherd. Lead us.
Astray.